As you can see here, it's just a complete warped, broken mess. All right, let's start things with a little teaser and some good news, bad news. The good news, we have the interior, chassis, and engine reassembly coming up. I did a lot of things here for the very first time, and I think you're going to see an amazing transformation. I'm really excited for you to watch this. The bad news, I did a lot of things here for the first time, so it was extremely frustrating on my end. You're going to see my learning process in action, which guess maybe is good news on your side, because hopefully you'll be entertained by the process. This whole process was about 2 months by the time I tried the things I wanted to try and then fixed the things that I messed up and then try it again. Ultimately, we get to a very satisfying conclusion, but you get to watch the process from start to finish. And of course, we're going to have some montages. So let's get right into that. Let's start with the interior. So I'm using a Testors oil-based enamel paint here, actually an old model master color, dark gull gray. I wanted to stick with the enamel for the interior, just like the outside. I want to make sure I don't have any compatibility issues if I were to use an acrylic color. I found lots of great detail on that instrument cluster once I got all of that old paint stripped off of there. I actually painted it black first with the airbrush, that's why it's masked off. But Monogram, you're pulling some shenanigans on this 1987 Mustang kit. I'm going to talk more about that later. One of my longtime tricks to simulate leather is to take a flat color like this gray and then go over it with gloss coat, just brush it on there kind of thick, and then go back over with a sanding board or just some sandpaper. That'll dull it down a little bit, but you'll still have a little bit of a sheen and a little bit of texture. I also use gloss coat over the gauges to simulate clear plastic that goes over top of the gauges. I added just a few custom touches to the interior. I put a couple stalks on the steering column that should be in the correct position for the car. They're a little oversized, but I did that on purpose just so you actually notice them a little bit better. I also added a handbrake in the middle. That's super easy to stretch some sprue, paint it up, sand it down, stick it in there. And of course I had to do a custom shifter since the shifter was broken. And these Fox bodies, the shifter actually angles forward a little bit, so I made sure to put a little bit of an angle on that. And then just for fun, I put some seatbelt buckles. I didn't put actual seat belts in there, but I did get the buckles in there. Maybe someday in the future, I'll put some seat belts into it. Big moment here, everybody. This is the very first time I've ever done custom carpeting in a model car. That means fabric, fibers, anything. Obviously, I'm using flocking powder here. It came out all right. I wasn't as precise as I should have been with my glue application and putting the powder down. It was just a little splotchy in spots. But this is my first time. Jump into the comments, let me know. For my first time, is this all right? Here's another first for me. The original windshield, it's gone. I have no idea where it is. I couldn't find it. I found one in my parts box that was a close fit, but it needed to be trimmed down. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this with the clear plastic, and it was all scuffed up afterwards. So I had to go through the full sanding process. Again, another first. I started with 400 grit, progressively stepped up to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, and I ended with 7,000 grit. I could go a little bit further, but the 7,000, it gave me the look that I wanted. Not absolutely crystal clear, a little bit of a weathered look. Here is the completed interior, a very close look. You can see how the flocking powder is just a little off in spots, but take a look at the dash. Now, I'll discuss this in the final video of this series. Take a look at that dash. This is a 1987 Mustang. If you happen to be a Mustang aficionado, jump into the comments and tell me what you see wrong here. For the rest of you, we'll cover this at the end of the series. Now let's build an engine. I decided to use the engine that came in this kit, the one that I took out. It did have some modifications. Obviously, I had a big hole in the hood. I had something sticking up through there. I thought about trying to find a stock 5.0 liter Mustang intake manifold, but I decided to keep the dual carb setup on here. This kit actually originally came with just a round air cleaner with dual intakes on either side, which, like the interior, that's more shenanigans for a 1987 Mustang that we're going to talk about in the next episode. I do want to try to make this as stock as I can, so I rifled through my parts box and found a pretty good looking serpentine belt that looks like it might have actually been original to this kit, because that looks like a Mustang serpentine belt to me. And I wanted to try to tweak it up, make it look a little bit better, so I wanted to add a lot of the things that were missing from the kit, dress up the power steering pump, some other accessories. Really, I thought this would be the easiest part of the whole process. Just a straight sand, reassemble, repaint, maybe with a few nice tweaks here and there, right? I won't say I got carried away. I was just really going for realism here. I found some better parts and everything was going really well. Till it wasn't. Taking a little cut here of the action, I've colossally messed up my serpentine belt system here for the engine. As you can see here, it's just a complete warped, broken mess, and it wasn't bad before. The alternator, there was a little bend in the plastic. The alternator was a little crooked, and I thought, well, I'll just take my little aim and flame here and just heat it up just enough to bend that back. And yeah, we got it too hot and it shriveled the plastic up. And then as I tried to fix the error, it just got worse and worse and worse, and the whole thing flipped around. And now I don't know if I'm going to use this at this point or not. I don't know if I'm going to try to tweak it a little bit. This is what was originally on the engine right here. That was broken when I took it off. I could try to repurpose this, and I think I'll end up doing that. This is kind of a crazy modified engine anyways for a stock 1987 Mustang GT. And I'm familiar enough with the engine to know, yeah, okay, that was technically a correct stock serpentine belt. So I've got this. I've got this. I might try to rig up something where I have a power steering pump and an alternator. We'll see. But yeah, I've done a lot of work on this already. I added the power steering reservoir there. This is actually like a smog pump that goes on these cars, that little tiny piece down there. I mean, it's wasted. I mean, I could try yeah, but we're going to soldier on here. An application of heat that did work well. I'm just stretching some sprue to make some linkages for those boring, ugly lumps that are carburetors, just to dress it up a little bit. Obviously, I didn't strip the paint off of the engine, so I'm definitely using the old Testors paints here. I'm actually going over it with like a base, just a dull aluminum, and then I have some old buffing metallizer still, aluminum buffing metallizer, that I put over the top and then buff it up with a little bit of a Q-tip, just to give it a little bit of a metallic sheen, and I think it came out pretty good. That package of small styrene rods that has to be 35 years old, totally forgot I had it, so I went ahead and pulled that out to make some little spark plugs. Not really spark plugs, just little dowels, so I can hook up my awesome new plug wires that I decided to try to make out of some shiny little blue wire that I got at a local craft store. I thought this stuff bends, it'll be really cool, it'll be really shiny, it'll be really neat, it'll really spiff up the engine. But it just didn't work out. It was way too small and finicky to try to glue on those little spark plugs that I made. So I went old school, got out some gray thread, made a custom distributor cap, glued it all on there, wired it all up, and look at that, I've got a little spark plug wired up engine, yeah. Instead of going with that weird dual air filter cap that was on there before, I found a nice traditional Cobra intake to go right up on top there with the air cleaner, painted up nice and white, sits right on top of the carbs, and I think it came out really good. Not gonna lie, it's a bit of a hodgepodge. I wish it came out a little bit better. I spent a few weeks trying to suss all of this out, but honestly, I'm actually really happy with the way it came out, considering the disaster that got me into this mess in the first place. What I thought would be a simple process ended up being very complex, but I managed to find a fan, I got the radiator shroud, I got everything lined up. The engine ended up looking really, really well. I can't complain, considering what this was to start with. We now have a nice looking engine, and now let's get onto the chassis. You've seen me brush painting a lot in this video. With the undercarriage here, I'm using a flat red. I never stripped the black paint off of the chassis. And if you've ever spent any time underneath a car, especially one that's been used, it is not clean. It is not smooth. This gives me more volume, a little bit more texture, without a bunch of brush strokes to really give me the undercarriage that I wanted. And this is a unibody car, so that should be body color, not black. But that's not the only reason I'm brush painting. It's soothing. It's relaxing. I'm pretty good at airbrushing. I'm getting better. But by the time I set everything up, the noise of the compressor, I can just sit down with the bottle, whip out the paintbrush, go over a few areas, especially if it's an area like the undercarriage here, where if there are a few little brush strokes, it's not going to be a big deal. Here's another first for me, custom springs. I just had some springs out in my shop that looked like they were about the right size, dipped them into some gunmetal, and they fit right over the mounts for the rear axle. And it's actually fairly accurate to where you would find springs on the Fox Body Mustang. So it seemed like a no-brainer. Moment of truth time. And folks, here is why you always test fit before you go too far. The springs fit over those mounts, but the springs are wider and they don't fit into the mounting spots on the chassis. You know what that means. Time to bust out the Dremel. That's better. I was so happy to get the turbine wheels for the Mustang. I airbrushed these chrome, but the actual car, the finish is actually kind of dull. So I went back over with some aluminum plate, just a buffing metallizer, that actually dulled them down a little bit. And then I had to go through and try to do some Goodyear raised white lettering on the tires. Very, very 80s look here. Had some thin wire, so I couldn't resist trying to bend up a custom iBox sway bar. Red. I actually have one just like this on my 95 Mustang. Here we go, the hunt for an exhaust system. This kit came with a single exit exhaust. Another little bit of shenanigans that Monogram is up to. We'll talk about that again in the last episode, but I found a dual setup that I think was from an old Camaro. There was a muffler on the back that I had to cut off, but the rest of the piping, it had the bends to go over a solid rear axle. It ended up fitting perfectly. Super stoked at how this came out. Of course, I couldn't leave well enough alone on the exhaust. I cut out a little piece of plastic to give it an H-pipe up front. And then for the tips, now the 87 to 93 Mustang GTs, they had turned down tips that were hidden up underneath the car. They didn't come straight back. So I found some old side pipes that had curved tips, cut them off, perfect fit. Again, very happy with how that came out in the end. here comes the game changer. This looks really disgusting. That's a rust wash. That is steel wool in a container with some water that I just let sit for a few weeks. It got all rusty. If you want to do a realistic rust wash, why not use actual rust? This is a first for me. You're seeing it in action right now. I tried it on the rear axle. It came out looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and do the rest of the car. This is, after all, a used car. It's not a show car. I'm not presenting it that way. And, well, just take a look at how it comes out. Just when I thought I was done, I wasn't satisfied with the way the exhaust looked. I had these little metal round clips, very, very small, that I thought I would use for battery terminals. And I thought, if I can spread these out a little bit, these could be exhaust clamps. And, well, they are. And now I have a very distinctive H-pipe where it connects to the mid-pipe, where it connects into... what are those, cherry bomb mufflers? I don't know. Hopefully it's loud enough for people to run out of the way when they see the Mustang about to crash into them. And with that, I finally call the chassis complete. And that brings us here. A lot of assembly just happened in the last 20 or so minutes for you. Many, many weeks for me. I'm happy with the way the undercarriage came out. I'm probably happiest with that most of all. The interior, I'm pretty happy with the interior as well. That actually ended up being the easiest part of this build, which I didn't expect. But we are so not done yet. We have one more video in the series to go where everything comes together. But if you look at the front of this car, you can see my biggest challenge is yet to come. So stay tuned. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.